Welcome back to the Data Protection Diaries, welcome back to the vlog. In today's video we're going to be talking about compliance in general. There's a phrase that I like to use which is basically that compliance is a journey and not a destination. And what that really means is that when you're looking at compliance, when you're looking at building compliance frameworks, or you're looking at being compliant with something like data protection or the GDPR, that it's going to take time. It's a process, it's a journey process rather than just an end point. And today we're going to cover what that looks like and where you can get started on that journey. If you're new to these videos, if you're new to this content, please do click subscribe down in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. If you are not new, make sure that you like the video. If you're new, like the video as well, obviously. Comment down below, let me know your thoughts. What kind of journey have you been on your compliance journey? Do any of these things kind of resonate with you? Anyway, for now, let's get on with what we want to talk about. Today's video is born from a number of conversations that I've had recently with clients. We've kind of been working with people to deliver a gap analysis, and then they're looking at what is the next stage for their organization, like what's the next part of the process, how are they going to demonstrate compliance to their key stakeholders internally, but also those key stakeholders from outside of the business. Now, the point here is that compliance is, as I've already said, a journey. It is not an end point, it's not a destination. So the first thing to remember when you're looking at any kind of journey towards compliance or looking at any kind of compliance framework is that it is going to take time. So you're going to have to be patient, you're going to have to invest time in understanding the organization, understanding the challenges that the organization faces, and then identifying areas where you can make improvements, identifying areas where you can add in controls, and points where you can make sure that you are able to demonstrate your compliance with whatever piece of regulation it is that you are aiming to be compliant with. Being a data protection channel, we are going to be talking about the GDPR, data protection law in general. So for most people, your journey towards compliance is going to start with some kind of gap analysis. Now, a gap analysis basically looks at what you currently have in place, so what controls, what processes, what policies, what procedures, what training, what documentation exists within the organization, and where are the gaps. So what are the requirements of the regulation, what are the requirements of your local data protection laws, and how are you going to get from a point where you are to a point where you're comfortable that you're complying with the things that you need to comply with. Gap analysis can be done internally, it can be done by your own team if you're working in-house. It can also, of course, be done by a third party or a consultancy such as iStorm. What's important is that the gap analysis is aligned to your organization, it understands the risks that your business faces, and it understands what your business needs to do to be compliant with data protection law. That is going to vary depending on industry, depending on sector, etc. So understanding and having somebody or an organization that understands your business is the first important part of your journey when you're looking at getting a gap analysis done. If you've already kind of done a gap analysis, or you have an understanding of the kind of challenges and risks that the business is facing, the first thing that we always tend to look at is the record of processing activity, or the ROPA. So the ROPA really is kind of the window on the organization. It's the single point, it's the single document where you can start to see what information is being processed, why that information is being used, what the lawful basis is for that, what technical controls are in place for the security of that information, and also any third party. So who is that information being shared with, who does the responsibility lie with, and who's in control of it. The reason that I always tend to start here on any kind of compliance journey is because it allows you to identify areas of risk within the business. It allows you to identify particular controls that may need to be introduced, but it also just gives you a really clear and easy viewpoint of what information is being held, what it's being used for, and what kind of levels of sensitivity you might be looking at, because that's really going to define the rest of your compliance and framework journey. Once you've done your ROPA, the next thing that I tend to look at is data protection impact assessments. So you've identified your high risk processing activities through your ROPA, you've found your kind of special category information, you've found your high risk processing activities. Now the next question is, have those activities been assessed? Are those activities fair? Are they just? Are the right controls in place? Do the people utilising your services or your employees understand that these activities are taking place? Have they been provided with the right level of information? Have you challenged the organisation about how things are being done? Are they being done in the right way? Again, impact assessments give a very clear view on the business. It's a very useful tool to kind of get out, talk to people, talk to different teams within the organisation, kind of understand their challenges, understand their mindset, and understand their viewpoint around compliance and regulation as well. Do they get what they need to know? Do they understand the potential impacts of the activities that they're carrying out? Are there things that could be done to improve that understanding? So you've got your ROPA, you've got some impact assessments being done, you're starting to understand the kind of mindset of the organisation more. This is a perfect opportunity to start introducing some awareness, start introducing some training. So usually by this point in your journey, you've started to identify potential areas within the business where there is going to be risk around the information that's being processed, and you've started to identify what the kind of mindset of the organisation is. So who knows what, who doesn't understand potentially certain areas of the regulation or potentially certain impacts from not being compliant. That means that you can now start to build your training program. Now a training program can take many different forms. Personally, I'm not a massive advocate of that kind of annual training. So every 12 months you do the kind of the same course, you answer the same questions, everybody has to do the same thing. I prefer to do general ongoing awareness training, so looking at key risks across the business, looking at previous incidents, looking at changes in the landscape, things like working from home, and doing awareness around all of those things. So regular memos, talking about risks and issues in team meetings, constantly drip feeding that kind of compliance culture into the organisation is a really good way of bringing a company along on that compliance journey. Also really important to identify specific areas within the business where people need specific training. So if you've got a team working specifically on subject access requests, or a team within HR that deals with subject access requests, for instance, that team should be trained on how to deal with those requests, what kind of information to be looking for, how to spot a request coming into the business. Again, the same with your data protection impact assessments. If you have a change control process in place, and that change control process runs through a certain team, or all IT changes go through an IT change control board, that team of people, so those individuals, should be trained on how to complete a data protection impact assessment. So training doesn't have to be generic, it doesn't have to be for everyone. It should be tailored to specific parts of the business, and that combined with ongoing awareness and good induction training, so always telling people what their responsibilities are when they join the business, is really going to give you a good compliance base, and it's going to bring you along on your journey a lot further. Possibly controversially, the last thing that I tend to look at when I'm kind of helping an organisation flesh out their compliance journey is actually the policies and the procedures. Now, the reason that I like to do policies and procedures last is because until you understand the challenges that the organisation faces, until you understand the mindset of the organisation, it's very difficult to create policies and procedures to support that. So if you don't know how you're going to deal with subject access requests, how are you going to have a procedure telling people how to do it? If you don't know what your response to an incident is going to be, how are you going to document that? How are you going to write it down? Now, policies can be very principles based, which does make life a lot easier. So you can have a security principle mindset. You can want to have 2FA in place for all systems. You can have particular password controls or password complexities. And that can form your kind of baseline policy documentation. Again, things like having a baseline privacy notice drafted, having something exist within the organisation is definitely no bad thing. But waiting until you have completed more of your journey before you start creating detailed policies and procedures can be very, very beneficial, and it means that you don't have to go back and change things every couple of weeks, every time a little process changes or every time something changes within the business. It also gives the organisation comfort that this is how things are done, this is the way things are going to be done, and anybody new coming in, anybody looking at induction training, those policies, those procedures, they are now there, they are complete, and this is the framework that we're going to be working from, and this is what we expect from you as an employee. One of the most common questions that we get asked when we're in any kind of consultancy or outsourced DPO engagement is, how long is this going to take? So what are we looking at? 95% of our DPO services, or our outsourced DPO services, are run over a minimum of a 12-month period. So people take a bank of hours and we support that organisation for a minimum of 12 months. Those hours can be used to create frameworks, they can be used to deliver training, they can be used to build ropers, DPIAs, all of those kinds of things. But the most important thing that we always have to remind the clients that it is that compliance is a journey, not a destination. So you're not going to get quick fixes, you're not going to get things done easily, you're not going to build a culture of compliance in a couple of weeks. It takes time. It can take 6 months to get a business in the right kind of mindset. It could take another 6 months to get a business fully understanding and kind of get that culture of awareness and get that culture of understanding properly embedded. It can take a couple of years, even longer in really big international organizations, to get that message out to everybody, get it embedded, get policies, get procedures, get training in place, so that even when you have people moving and people leaving the business and new people starting, that actually that culture still carries on, and those new people that are brought in with that kind of cultural compliance mindset. You have to be patient, you have to be prepared to put the time in, but if you are, the benefits long term of understanding that compliance is a journey rather than just an endpoint are going to be clear, and you're going to have a much better organisation for it. As always, this is a fairly succinct view on the world. We are very, very busy this week, so I haven't had a lot of time to look at creating content and look at creating videos. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up. Comment your thoughts down below, and of course, if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks very much.